Welcome to the SEEEN. I'm your host, Mark Palmer. Thank you for being here, folks. Today, we're going to be looking into a book called Architecture, Mysticism, and Myth by William Lethaby. This is a book that I found at the Serious Readers Dog Star bookstore, right? The Dog Star bookstore. It has a very clear allusion to the constellation Sirius, which coincidentally, yesterday, there was an alignment between Sirius and the constellation and the new moon, the Leo new moon. Sorry, I was looking towards my resident astrologer Tara for that one, but she is listening to the Pleiadians right now. That's okay. She'll join us in a moment. We've got this really interesting book. I found it in a equally interesting bookstore, and let's get into it. Chapter 1, The World Fabric. If we erase from the mind absolutely all that science has laboriously spied out of the actual facts of the material universe and ask ourselves what would have been the thoughts by which man attempted at first to explain and image forth the natural order, we may put ourselves in sympathy with notions that at first seem absurd. We may see that the progress of science is merely the framing and destruction, one by one, of a series of hypotheses, and that the early cosmogeneses are one in kind with the widest generalizations of science, from certain appearances to frame a theory of explanation, from phenomena to generalize law. In thus putting ourselves back into the early world, not only must we remember the limitations to the knowledge of phenomena, but also the inadequate means of expression. Not only must we ask ourselves what primitive man, to use the phrase for what it is worth, not letting it betray us, can have observed. We must ask at the same time what images can he have had before him to which he might liken the wonder of the sky and the might of the sea, or rather these are two phases of the same question by which we may realize the early systems, for in these things at least concepts were immediately linked with words which were descriptive comparisons. The unknown universe could then only be explained in terms of its known parts. The earth, shut in by the night sky, must have been thought of as a living creature, a tree, a tent, a building, and these each form the world system to peoples now living. Given the data, says Herbert Spencer, as known to him, the inference drawn by the primitive man is the reasonable inference. A tree with wide overarching branches must have formed an apt and satisfactory explanation, for legends of a world tree are so widely distributed. We meet with them at the dawn of record, and they still strike their roots where wild in woods the savage runs. The Chaldean inscriptions describe such a tree as growing at the center of the world. Its branches of crystal form the sky and droop to the sea. The Phoenicians thought the world like a revolving tree over which was spread a vast tapestry of blue embroidered with stars. Traces of this scheme linger late into times of culture and would account for a story in Apollonius of Tyana, that the people of Sardis doubted if the trees were not created before the earth, an idea exactly parallel to the controversy in the Talmud as to the priority in creation of the heavens or the earth, one side maintaining that the object was made first, then the pedestal, the other that the foundation is laid before the building is erected. All the East knew of such a tree. In Japan, gods broke their swords against it in vain. In Greece, it seems its memory long to have survived as the olive of the forest of the Colonias. In the Norse system, a vast tree, the world ash, rises in the center of the earth, its branches forming the several heavens of the gods. Its roots strike deep into hell, and there a serpent evermore lies deep asleep at the world's dark core. Maori science still represents such a tree as rising to the heavens, that dark nocturnal canopy which like a forest spreads its shades. Its mighty growth first forced asunder heaven and earth. Such an idea is probably very uniform at a certain early stage of civilization. The fundamental conception of these myths, says Lee Normant, which never appear in perfection except under their oldest forms, represents the universe as an enormous tree. Its trunk transfixes the earth, projecting upwards into the heavens and below into the abyss. The heavens revolve on this axis and may be reached by climbing the stem. An extract from Dr. Tyler's Early History of Mankind will lead us to a later point of view. Man, now surrounded by his own works, sees in the universe a larger tent to dwell in, a chamber, and ultimately a most elaborate structure, a conception which lasts long even in the direct line of descent of science. This idea it is children find so difficult to shake off that there must be a brick wall somewhere circumscribing the universe, and we still recognize it in the phrase to make the welkin ring. There are, says Dr. Tyler, other mythological ways besides the heaven tree by which in different parts of the world it is possible to go up and down between the surface of the ground and the sky or the regions below. Such tales belong to a rude and primitive state of knowledge of the earth's surface and what lies above it and below it. The earth is a flat plain surrounded by the sea, and the sky forms a roof on which the sun and the moon and stars travel. The Polynesians, who thought like so many other people, ancient and modern, that the sky descended at the horizon and enclosed the earth, still call foreigners heaven-bursters, as having broke in from another world outside. Now, let me stop right here, because this is reminding me of the David Talbot Saturn theory, the Birkeland current that we talked about with Ari Aslin on the first appearance of Ari's on this podcast, My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. I think that was episode... Let's go back and see what episode that was. Hold on a second, folks. We just published episode 64 of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast with Greg Carlwood. Just did it. August 9th, 2021, 11:27 p.m. What was I just looking up? Right, Ari Aslin. What was his first appearance on this podcast? What number? It was episode 23. I knew it was in the 20s. Episode 23 with Ari Aslin. We talked about esoteric cosmology. And here we go, getting more confirmation. And even on the flat earth stuff, too. It's just very interesting. So here we go. As having broken in from another world outside. The sky is to most savages... Hold on. Hit the brakes. When was this book written? 1891. Okay, so that's why they're calling people savages, folks. Let's not get offended here. What it is called in the South American language, the earth on high, and we can quite understand the thought of some Paraguayans that at death their souls would go up to heaven by the tree which joins the earth and sky. There are holes or windows through the sky roof or firmament where the rain comes through, and if you climb high enough you can get through and visit the dwellers above, who look and talk and live very much in the same way as the people on earth. As above the flat earth, so below it, there are regions inhabited by men or man-like creatures who sometimes come up to the surface and sometimes are visited by the inhabitants of the upper earth. We live, as it were, upon the ground floor of a great house, with upper stories rising one over another above us, and cellars down below. This stage of thought lasted so long, embracing the great architectural ages in its span, that one cannot but see that there must have been a relation and reaction between such a world structure and the buildings of man, especially the sacred buildings, set apart as they mostly were for a worship that thought it found its object in earth, sky, and stars. It would appear generally that to the great civilizing races a square-formed universe preceded the hemispherical. Indeed, we are much in the hemispherical age at present. It is just archaic enough to furnish the poet with his similes, but an old poet like Job found his comparisons in the chamber form, a cubical box with a lid on it. In the center of this vast box, whose lid is the sky, rises the earth mountain, which is its prop and the pivot of its revolutions. It was seen that the center of this revolution is at a point within the space guarded by the Great Bear, and that beyond this the stars dip under the earth of the northern horizon. Thus the earth mountain in the north furnishes a most adequate explanation of the apparent motions of the heavens. The crystal or metal heaven of the fixed stars revolves about it, and consequently the stars are hidden behind it. In every revolution, the sun, moon, and planets issuing from a hole at the east and sinking into another at the west move overhead and find their way back by a subterranean path. The motive power was sometimes given by active beings, as in the Book of Enoch, or by the winds. Thus, the universe was like a great mill. It is likely that the dome was the next step, although as yet they were hard put to it to convey the idea. So a skull or half an eggshell furnished the comparison for the whole canopy of heaven, as in the northern system of Ida. Earth was not formed, nor heaven above. A yawning gap there was, but grass nowhere. The earth is made fast in the midst, the sea round about it in a ring. The firmament in the form of a skull was set up over the earth with 4 sides, and under each corner they set dwarves. The earth called Midgard is round without, and beyond is deep sea. In the midst of the world was reared Asgard, where Odin is enthroned, seeing over the whole world and each man's doings. Without, in the deep sea, lies the Midgard worm, tail in mouth, the Ouroboros. The holiest seat of the gods is at Yggdrasil's ash. Its boughs spread over the whole world. 3 roots it has, one in heaven, one in hell, where is Nidhogg, one where before was yawning gap, and there is the spring of knowledge. A fair hall is there, and from it issue 3 maidens, has been, being, and will be, who shape the lives of men. On the boughs of the ash sit an eagle, wise in much, and between his eyes a hawk, while a squirrel runs up and down the tree, bearing words of hate betwixt the eagle and the worm. The following may serve as a general description of what we may call the chamber type, either square or round, with a ceiling or a dome. The earth is a mountain, and around its base flows the ocean, or it floats on the ocean. Beyond is a high range of mountains which form the walls of the enclosure, and on these is either laid the ceiling in one great slab, or it is domed. Sometimes the system is a compromise. The earth square, the sky circular, and they do not seem to have realized the difficulty of the pendatives. Well, that was in parentheses. This author, he's interesting. The firmament is sustained by the earth mountain in the center, as in the Esquimaux account given by Dr. Rink. The earth with the sea supported by it rests upon pillars and covers an underworld accessible by various entrances from the sea, as well as from mountain clefts. A Above the earth an upper world is found, beyond which the blue sky, being of solid consistence, vaults itself like an outer shell, and as some say, revolves around some high mountain top in the far north. A man in a boat went down to the border of the ocean, where the sky comes down to meet it. Man was created on the mountain top, where it is in contact with heaven, and all earthly vegetation springs from the seeds of the central tree. In the South Pacific, Mr. Andrew Lang tells us the sky is a solid vault of blue stone. In the beginning of things, the sky pressed hard on the earth, and the god Ru, spelled R-U, was obliged to thrust the two asunder. Ru is now the Atlas of Mangaya, the supporting Ru. Above the firmament is the oversea, and the rain falls from it through perforations. It serves as the floor of the upper regions, and flowing down the firmament, or down the sides of the mountain, supplies earthly seas. The stars are either attached to the firmament or float on this oversea. There is an amusing story of this celestial sea as late as Gervasy of Tilbury. Some people coming out of a church were surprised to see an anchor dangling by a rope from the sky, which caught in the tombstones. Presently a man was seen descending with an object of detaching it, but as he reached the earth he died as we should if drowned in water. Very interesting. That's spelled Gervase of Tilbury, Tilbury. That's some kind of story about people walking out of church and seeing a rope dangling from the sky with an anchor attached, and when the man went to go and try to detach it, he died as if he was drowning in the air, like a fish out of water. Very interesting stuff. In the Egyptian system, it would seem to have been of the square type. The Egyptian, says Champollion, compared the sky to a ceiling of an edifice. Illustrations which figure the cosmos in personified forms are frequent on temples and mummy cases. An example is given by Lenormand, showing Seb, the earth mountain, Tep, the firmament, and Nut, the heavenly waters. In the Book of the Dead, the soul passes through the gateway of this world into the other. The house of Osiris, and that too was shut in by a wall with a great gateway, for the sun at the east to reach our land. The dead had to be ferried over the waters which surrounded the earth, and so the river of death had purely a geographical import in its origins. Renouf says that Ra is addressed as Lord of Great Dwelling. The Great Dwelling is the universe, as the hall of Seb is the earth. The hall of Nut is the heaven, and the hall of the twofold Maat is the netherworld. Water was with them the primordial element in the formation of the universe, of which Maspero gives this account. For the astronomers of Egypt, as for the writers of the first chapter of Genesis, the sky was fluid and enclosed wholly the earth, resting on the solid atmosphere. When the elemental chaos took form, the god Sku raised on high the waters and spread them out in space. It is on this celestial ocean, Nut, that the planets and stars float. The monuments show us them as genii of human or animal form, navigating each his bark in the wake of Osiris. There was another widely known conception which presented the stars fixed like suspended lamps to the celestial vault, and they were lighted afresh each night by divine power to give light to the nights of the earth. So, over and over again, we have this idea that the heavens are this vault or this solid, closed-off space, which a lot of you Flat Earth listeners are probably really excited at that. So go out and buy a copy of Architecture, Mysticism, and Myth by William Lethaby. It's a very interesting book. I happened to find it while I was in Lancaster at a very strange bookstore that's Lancaster, Pennsylvania. On today's Swapcast with Phil, Amish Phil, from the Amish Inquisition podcast, he is from Lancashire County, England. So there was a little coincidence, especially because that was a last-minute trip down to Pennsylvania, and Phil and I had planned this podcast about a month out. So little synchronicities abound, as usual, when you're living in the SEEEN, the synchromistic experiment in the ever-expanding now, or the synchromistic exploration of the ever-expanding now. It's the second one. And here's the thing. When we're at the bookstore, certain books like this one, Architecture, Mysticism, and Myth, just pop out. And, I can't go to every bookstore, folks, so if you like books and you go to used bookstores a lot, join us on the Patreon, patreon.com/MFTIC. Get in touch with me. Tell me about the weirdest book you've ever found. You can also go to podinbox.com/MFTIC and leave us a voicemail. Tell us why your family thinks you're crazy, or tell us about your favorite book, a strange book that you found at a bookstore. And if you join the Patreon, sign up, I'll send you an MFTIC sticker. We got shirts on the way. And if you sign up for the higher tiers, you can also get a used book from my collection. That's right, I will send you a book along with that sticker. So sign up on the Patreon, patreon.com/MFTIC. But don't expect me to send you this book, folks. Architecture, Mysticism, and Myth. I'm going to be holding on to this one. It's a really good one. It's a rare find, $22, but you know what? It was worth it. It's original, 1891. So, very cool stuff. Anyways, thank you for listening to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Enjoy this Swapcast with Amish Phil and the Amish Inquisition.
Five, four, three, two, one.
Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. Welcome to the Amish Inquisition, episode 194, Sunday the 8th of August. I'm Amish Phil, and I met up with Mark Steves from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy this week. And we had a little chat about all sorts of things, synchromystic experiments, and lots of interesting stuff you'll find interesting. I got rather drunk and influenced by substances. And I messed up with the time zones, so I ended up having to record with Mark after Matt had gone home. So we recorded everything backwards. So you'll hear from Mark and myself for a bit, for an hour, and then I'll put in the topical stuff that me and Matt did, the housekeeping and the Rona news and all the rest of it. Okay, right, enjoy. See you next week. Draw! We're going, Mark. Praise Jabulon.
Right on.
That's one of our catchphrases, praise Jabulon. Have you ever come across that phrase in your research, Jabulon?
No, tell me about
It's like it's something to do with like the Freemasonry triple godhead. So Jah being Yahweh, and Bull being Baal, and On being Osiris from ancient Egypt. And apparently this is some secretive word that they use, Jabu on. But I just found it funny and put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah. No, the person I just brought up, Michael Wan, he just did a presentation on Baal. And, yeah, it's quite an interesting character. Personally, I think... sometimes people go too far when they do this research. They get a little scared and think like the whole world's falling on their head, and make a lot of those connections where they aren't. But with the right discernment, you find that more often than not, there's no such thing as a coincidence, and yeah, Babylon, and the Tower of Babel, and what does it sound like when someone's not making sense? They're babbling, and the Tower of Babylon was kind of like this moment where humanity got divided into all these different tongues. And from then we became, uncooperative with one another. And I think that's where we're heading now, is like the mending of that division that was created, like the Piscean age that we're leaving is all about division, and now we're heading into this Aquarian age. I think they want to use English as the global language. It's pretty obvious. I didn't come up with that thought, but it's curious because it's a mix of Irish, it's a mix of German, it's a mix of French. It's sort of a mix of different languages, English, and it's just curious how, this language and then I think Ethiopian are like the two languages that they're teaching to this AI computer, right?
Right.
Have you heard anything about this AI computer that they're trying to build?
No. What's this?
So, yeah, I was listening to the Higher Side chats, and I believe Alison McDowell was talking about this and how this AI computer that they want everybody generated into, it is learning two languages first, which is the English and Ethiopian. And I just thought that was so strange, considering, Ethiopia is apparently the place where the Ark of the Covenant was left, and they're one of the only countries in Africa that was never colonized. Even though the Italians tried to colonize them, they successfully fought them off. But it's almost like, the world leaders, the global world leaders want to either shove one at them for never, bowing down, by kind of pushing them into this globalism thing in that way. Or maybe it connects, because we have this place, the Horn of Africa, the Strait of, what is it? That sea, is it the Red Sea or the Dead Sea? From my perspective, they're kind of the same thing, but the Red Sea, right, is where Israel and Egypt, they run along that, and then that goes down, like the Gulf there.
Gulf of Arabia is on the other side. Yes. The Tigris and the Euphrates, yeah.
So there's something about this region of the world,
Yeah, well, crossing the Red Sea goes back to the book again, isn't it? Although some guys say it's the Reed Sea, and that it's a mistranslation, and what they meant to say was they were crossing the Reed Sea. But there is something about, you're right, there's something about this geographic area, isn't there, that seems special. And it's
the river, right? This Tiger and Euphrates River was said to be, the Fertile Crescent, the place where humanity was born. But when we get into the prophecies and the teachings of Edgar Sayce, and then you go even further back and you see Plato and all these Greek guys are writing about Atlantis, and, with such detail. And then we actually find these megalithic structures that sort of match up to the Atlantean story. Yeah. To me, I think there might even be something older, right? And this isn't, again, my original thought. This is just based on the research and being the sponge of all these different podcasts. things work in a sort of reflective way, in a microcosm, macrocosm way. And just like the Tigris and Euphrates River create this sort of like fertile zone where humanity was supposedly like born, right over here in America, there's a very ancient old river called the Susquehanna River, and it becomes the Chesapeake Bay, which is where Washington, D.C. is. It's where the first computer was ever built. It was where some of the first work with electricity ever happened. So this is a very interesting place, but it's also strange because the Susquehannock people and the Susquehanna, the word Susquehanna, actually has more roots in Gaelic language, Irish language, going back to the connection that I just, where English is kind of like this mix of Irish and German, but we also have this strange history of Ireland where were the people in Ireland totally living just on that one little part? I don't believe so. I think there was a time when either the ocean was much lower, there was more land to traverse, or they just were very skilled at seafaring and they were able to go off and find new land, and they never wrote back. They didn't send letters back. So it's like if Irish people left and went to America and made a little civilization, how would we have known? It would have been fairly remote, and then they could have just blended right in when the rest of the Europeans came and started building these colonies, and maybe even that's a part of what these Tartarian researchers are thinking about when they talk about how it's sort of like rewriting history. This place was not what it was, and then these people come in and they say, oh yeah, no, these are our buildings, they weren't here before, and they rewrite the books and make it seem like all these old looking buildings are actually built by colonists. But you go back and you read the colonists' reports of what they had and the provisions they had, and it doesn't always add up. It's like, okay, you're telling me they were able to quarry these big, huge pieces of stone to build these like old town halls and libraries and these things that just look Roman or totally ancient. Like there's these libraries that are very common on the East Coast with like bright red stone, orange stone. And I could just be a complete novice, and like some guy who's an expert in archaeology and geology and architecture could come and be like, dude, you're an idiot, there's an explanation for that. But the fact of the matter is, from my perspective, from the story of my life, there's something mysterious about that. And I think as it connects to what you asked me about before we started recording, the synchromystic experiment and the ever-expanding now, is like your moment, the moment you're in, the things that come to your awareness are important and valuable, and they align with your purpose. And for me, that purpose is sort of like going into these mysteries and looking this stuff up, and I chose that. I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And more things started presenting themselves, right? So it's kind of where I'm at now, is like, how do we play with these synchronicities in a way that's proactive and gets us to this kind of law of attraction place where we're actually manifesting our future, and our destiny. And I mean, the signs, the symbols, the synchronicities, they start to increase in their volume as you expand your awareness, So.
That's something you mentioned, pulling on a thread, and that's something I noticed when I started getting into esoteric subjects, and that you'll read a book and then you'll read 3 books further down the line, and you'll remember something from the first book and you'll recognize a connection there, and you feel as you go into more of these subjects that you are pulling on a thread, and more things start becoming revealed to you, and you start drawing connections where previously you wouldn't have even bothered to look. And so you can end up reading books on very different topics, whether it be like gematria or sacred geometry or the tarot or astrology, ancient history, and you can still pick out these certain accents and threads that run between these subjects, and it does give you like a mystical feeling. You think, whoa, this is beyond a coincidence. There's something here. there's something that needs more investigation, and you feel like you're just starting to... It's like a Christmas day and you get that present and you just peel off a tiny corner of the wrapping, if you can see what it is. And you just feel like you're pulling more and more threads, and, you know, it fills you with intrigue, and then you feel like, you know, am I going to find something not just meaningful, but life-changing? Is there some sort of greater truth to be discovered that are sort of prosaic explanations for everything, you know, aren't even beginning to comprehend?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, it almost seems like a form of madness to somebody who's not in this.
It becomes an obsession.
Curiosity. Yeah, well, but that's the thing, is like, you have to be present, you know. I think being present is what I found is the most important thing, because sometimes the synchronicities, they're pointing you towards things that you're avoiding in your life, maybe, or things that need more attention. But yeah, it does kind of seem like a form of madness to people who might not be in the sphere. Like, you know, how do those things connect? You know, you imagine like the red strings on the wall all strung up over a map, like making all these connections. But really, it's something to participate in before you can fully understand, you know, and that's why I bring it back to purpose, because from my perspective, it seems like I've always had the intention of giving back to the world somehow. I've always been curious in a deeper meaning, you know, and when I look into my astrological chart, it sort of backs that up, you know, which is always cool. I encourage people to look into that for themselves, because I'm not an expert. I'm only beginning to like figure that out about myself. But I think purpose is really important, and some people's purposes might be a lot less complex than that. Like, some people aren't here to go and solve a bunch of mysteries, but if you're listening to something like this, the Amish Inquisition, I would imagine that you're interested in mysteries. And that's kind of like, to bring it back to podcasting, why I love podcasting so much, because it's kind of like synchronicity fuel, because all these podcasts are just waiting out there for you to find. And, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts that you could listen to that would probably add something to your life in a positive way. And, you know, you don't know which one it's going to be, really. Like, sometimes you just see a name and you're like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, I remember the first time I saw the word Grimerica, I was like, what's Grimerica? You know, like, what is that? That's like America, grimy. You know, I'm expecting like a rap, underground rap, like rhyme, you know, something like that. And I go and listen, and it's like two polite Canadian guys, you know, just chatting with mystical people and historians. And just like you described before, you get to talk to all these awesome authors and scholars and thinkers. And that's what, for me, Grimerica's show offered, like this whole group of people that I didn't know existed, you know, from my limited perspective before I found podcasting. Because the authors, they seemed real, but they were real on a different level, you know, like I could read their words, but it wasn't until I like heard Joseph Farrell's voice that his book, Gene, Giants, Monsters, and Men, actually came to life, you know, or like Mark Booth and his book, The Secret History of the World, you know, like I was able to hear those guys get interviewed, hear their voice, and now it's almost like going back and reading their book has another dimension to it. And that also is synchronistic, because I just found those books randomly thinking like, oh, that's an interesting cover, you know, like, let me check this out. And that book changed my life, you know. It's really profound. And then now having the opportunity, like you said, to be in the podcasting world, you know, I've talked to people who have inspired me that are just podcasters, like Graham and Darren from the Grimerica show. They did the 20th episode of the podcast I do. And even the podcast I do, I kind of was inspired by Sam, because Sam Tripoli was like, hey, what's the name of your podcast? I told him the old name of my podcast, and he was honest with me. He was like, that kind of sucks, you know, come up with something else that makes more sense, you know. So I was like, okay. And I'm hanging out at my family's house. I'm like, hey, I'm working for this podcast. It's called Tinfoil Hat. I'm so excited, you know. And they're like, what? Like, that's not a job. Like, what are you talking about? You need to get a real job. And I'm like, oh my God, my family thinks I'm crazy. Like, they don't realize how big of an opportunity this is. And then that's where the name of my show came from. My family thinks I'm crazy. And that's, you know, always been true, but it kind of took that moment synchronistically to create it, you know. And now here I am. My family thinks I'm crazy kind of birthed this other project called the Synchromystic Experiment in the Ever Expanding Now, because I want to be able to focus in, you know, and have conversations with people like Michael Wan and Ross Ben and Chris Knowles and Laurel Erica and all these people who kind of focus on, and those are just people I've spoken to in the past, you know, few weeks. There's so many more, you know. One guy that I've never met or talked to, Michael Sandler, I think his name is, and he's really inspired me a bunch with his automatic writing and all the information about automatic writing, and really what that's done is shown me that, you know, my life is a story, and once you own that and start to like feel that in an authentic way, you know, you can rewrite the story of your life in the direction that you want to live it. Would you say that's true for you, Phil?
Yeah, and it's quite empowering. You know, it depends how you grew up, but I mean, I sort of grew up in the sort of when the new atheists were big, and there's sort of a tendency to nihilism. There's a desolation and a sort of pointlessness of it all when you're immersed in this materialist paradigm that we currently live in, which, you know, from the post-Enlightenment era, it's sort of got worse and worse and sort of peaked with the new atheists. And it seems to me that there is a shift and that people are sort of rejecting this worldview, this paradigm, if you like, and saying, no, I don't believe I'm a fucking, you know, a sack of meat, a biological robot spinning, you know, an insignificant ant on the spinning rock hurtling through space, you know. I think there's something more to us. I think there's something special about the human race. As corny as it sounds, and, you know, if I was 20 years younger, I'd be laughing my cock off at myself for sounding like you know, chucking hippy-dippy bullshit about. But I really have had that experience, and it's hard to talk to people about because we're kind of in the minority. You know, most people are still entrenched in that sort of biological determinism.
And I think that this stuff kind of is in the air, you know, because I remember, like, I was born in 1994, so that was sort of towards the end of that era. Yep. And but I absorbed it, you know, because at a young age I was very much interested in animals and nature and science, so all of that appealed to me, and it felt like, oh, okay, yeah, evolution makes sense, this all makes sense. And like, I started getting interested in war and politics in like middle school and like weird shit like espionage. Like, why is a middle schooler interested in, you know, espionage? But I was. And then, you know, something happened. Like, martial arts came next naturally, but something happened that sparked me to smoke cannabis. And I think that really pushed me towards where I'm at now. And it's like opening my eyes to spirituality, because I would have been the same way, like laughing even from that 15-year-old perspective, like not knowing shit. I thought I knew it all. Yeah. And like being an atheist was like one of the ways that I thought I was smarter than my grandparents and my parents who, you know, would go to church. And now I kind of look back and I'm like, okay, well, I still don't agree with the church, but it's more for a philosophical reason now rather than just like a cultural reason. And cannabis really opened up that ability for me to think in this new way philosophically. And, you know, I don't want to say that it was like the creation of that new part of me, but it definitely was like a fuel, you know, it accelerated my spiritual growth. And I mean, I've smoked every day for the past 9 years, so I don't know if that's the healthiest way to smoke cannabis, but it's definitely a commitment that I've made, and I think that it's benefited me in the realms of spiritual intelligence and just straight up ability to kind of absorb what's around me. And yeah, I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for cannabis. But then again, podcasting was the next, phase of it for sure. But yeah, I definitely, I think it's in the air, and ever since 2012, there's been this feeling in the air of harmony. I think certain people can tap into it 100%. Some people only feel it like 60, 70%, like me, I'm probably like a 60%er. Harmony is kind of like where I'm trying to be at, even though the matrix is still dragging me down that 30, 40% some of the time, right? But then there's people who are totally flipped. Like they don't experience harmony unless they like go on a vacation or something, because they're so into the matrix and the way the matrix of our culture and technology has shaped our lives, onto this calendar system that we can't just sit and observe and have a moment of peace, in nature.
No, it's something that's missing, and this concept of free time as well. You go back to, they reckon now that hunter-gatherers had a lot of free time. It didn't really, all they had to do was look after the shelter and the food supply and the water and other than that, it was playtime. Other than making bits and clothes and building shelters and whatnot. But our lives are so consumed now. We're just consumption addicts. And we're born into this system. It's lucky that you get to break out of it and realize what's going on, because you're born and raised in this system of consumption. You're bombarded with advertising from the day you're born. You have your cultural norms and social norms that you have to adhere to. You grow up, you go to school, you get a job, you work to 65 and then you retire. It's like people have their whole lives planned in front of them. And what, I would think, what was the point? What did I actually learn? And, I was lucky. I came to a point in my life where I realized that it wasn't like an epiphany or a eureka moment or anything, but I was just spending so much of my time on meaningless shit. And it wasn't fulfilling. And I found there was so much value in the pursuit. Once you open your mind, try and get rid of some of this programming and think deeply about yourself and what you think you're here for. Right. Yeah. Thing is, I don't think people are introspective enough. I think a lot of people are just so hammered. They're so hammered by the daily grind that when they get home, they've worked 8 hours, they've picked the kids up, made the dinners and whatnot. They're so exhausted. They've no room. They've no mental energy to think, and they've no physical energy. And so Netflix goes on, and I'll finish that box set and maybe have a glass of wine to fucking numb the...
And even this, like, paradigm of the hunter-gatherer, and it's not you. That's kind of a general description of man's ancient past, but I just don't see the evidence for that. I think people lived in civilizations that were much more advanced than that. But besides that, look at our diets. I think our diets right now are ultimately, for the most part, the majority of people are eating things that are contributing to that sluggish mentality. Of like, I don't have the time to think about anything, so I'm just going to let, this television consume the time that would, and entertainment, the word, it's just to attain your mental space or enter your mental space,
Bread and circuses.
I just think that when I stopped watching television, it was around the same time that I started listening to podcasting a lot more. And don't get me wrong, like I got my like Twilight Zone DVDs, like the original Star Trek DVDs, like I'll watch those every now and then. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm coming to that place from the perspective of how was, the smart man that created this, like what was the message he was putting into this? Because there's always, a message, and art is art. We can interpret things. I don't want to become like a Luddite and say, oh, everything is terrible, don't participate in the media. But if you can approach the media with this perspective of discernment, like what's the bias, what's the agenda, what's the message behind this, you start to notice a lot of themes. And I think that's what gets you sick of media ultimately, and why you want to go back to some of the older stuff, like the original series of Star Trek or the Twilight Zone, or, from a time when things were a little more artistic. Maybe that's just my perspective, but for the most part, Netflix, it didn't take me more than a month or two to cancel it, because I got so bored. I'm like, there's nothing here that appeals. I never was a fan of horror movies because regular movies are just so horrifying already. They're just like, is this what life is to people? Because, when I smoke and I go for a hike and, like last night, I was sitting peacefully by the beach and two foxes ran out of the tall grass, ran right up to where my girlfriend and I were sitting 3 times. We're just sitting there peacefully. That was way more entertaining than anything you can find on Netflix. Just seeing wild foxes doing their thing in nature, on the beach too, of all places. It was just such a beautiful sight. But I think that's part of the SEEEN, the synchromystic experiment, and the ever-expanding now, is when you put yourself in the place of awareness and presence of the moment, the creator, the higher intelligence, whatever force, this omnipresent force that pervades all of us and permeates between all of us, it can bring you to appreciate those special moments. That's just one of many animal moments, and maybe that's just because I love animals that type of omen means more to me, and that's what comes up in my destiny. For other people, it might not be that way. Maybe somebody out there like really loves cars, and that's part of their synchronicity. They see certain cars, or whatever's kind of ubiquitous, because that's part of synchronicity. It's like that nothing's random. And we have this huge kind of almost chaotic field that we call the matrix. But there's no such thing as random. It's chaotic, but it's not random. There's order in every little experience. And the way things happen to you in your life, they're a reflection of your inner world. Like when you're frustrated, traffic seems to be a little more frustrating, and when you're taking it easy, maybe you don't notice it as much, and then traffic opens up a bit. I don't know how things are in the UK other than that you guys drive on the other side of the road.
The right side, yeah.
Here, I'm in between New York City and Boston, some of the biggest cities, in the world. So traffic can be kind of a nightmare depending on which road you take. But that's kind of like life, If you take the wrong route, you're going to have more obstacles than you would if you took the back roads, you went through the nature, So maybe this is another kind of soapbox moment that has no conclusion, but I think the synchromystic experiment, it's an experiment that you have to take in your own life. It's not that we're experimenting, we're exploring now, but when you first get into it, it's like an experiment. You have to test it out and see what happens. And maybe, your experience is going to be a lot different than mine, in which case get in touch with me, because that's a part of it, this sort of network of organic experiences, and adding them up from, the little stories and seeing how they build into this bigger story, and how we can all solve the mystery together when we have our head on straight and we're like figuring these things out. Like, why is this orange type of stone used in every library? Post, maybe there's a guy who knows it. Maybe he's wrong. And that's the cool part of like going into this mystery, is like even something as like bland you might think is architecture, like, who cares? Squares, rectangles, triangles, wood, stone, who cares? No, there's a lot of symbolism on buildings, statues, even down to the little like curved lines with a flower. Like everything has a sort of meaning and resonance, and that's something that I've just really tripped out on lately, is like looking at all these buildings with new eyes. Like, wow, okay, why is there a statue of a woman, with a spear stabbing a panther? Like, I just saw this today. She's riding a horse, she's got a spear, and she's stabbing a panther, and the panther's on the front of her horse. And this is in Connecticut, where there's no panthers.
Was it Hillary Clinton on the panther?
She might have a house somewhere in Connecticut. I wouldn't be surprised by that, but yeah, it's just out of place things like that, like a panther statue in a place where there's no panthers. Like, there's a meaning behind it. What is the meaning? And when we get into the darker conspiracy stuff, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, there are some symbols like, Saturnian type symbols that come up with the same groups over and over. Or like with the Freemasons, they're always close to a river. I mean, if a town has a river, the Freemason temple is probably across the street from that river.
Yeah.
I would say 9 times out of 10, at least where I'm at, some sort of landscape structure that's, unique. And then even down to like, all right, Ross Ben, who I just met up with in Philadelphia, I mentioned, Tara and my girlfriend and I mentioned like, wow, there's a lot of churches in Philadelphia. And he was like, yeah, there's a lot of red door churches. Have you ever heard about this?
No.
Red door church?
What's a red door church? It doesn't sound good.
No, right? It does not. So, according to Ross Ben, who has his book "Free Your Mind" and your mind will follow. Great book, as well as Great Mystery Philadelphia, another great book. He told us that a red door church is a church that's built on top of an ancient burial ground.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you've ever seen like Pet Cemetery, stuff is going on when you mess around with ancient burial grounds, but that's a part of the mystery, is like, why are these certain groups building churches
on top of
particular spots? It's because they have a esoteric knowledge that is not generally shared with the public. And I think that's something that I've always been very fascinated in, is the esoteric. And I know that's something that a lot of people in our community here, in the podcasting community, are excited to learn about, because we're in the age of Aquarius, where nothing is going to be hidden anymore. It's all coming to the light.
I like the stuff about it's funny how holy places always seem to get built on top of each other. It's like when the Spaniards made it to the New World, and wherever there was a Native American holy place, bulldoze it and put a church there. It's like the actual geography has a significance. Exactly. And you get into sort of ley lines and stuff like that, and like there's some sort of geographical system at work.
Absolutely. Yeah, and around here in New England, any place that was sacred to the Native Americans, they would call it devil's something. So like there's the devil's den, there's the devil's hop yard, there's the devil's cliff, there's the devil's, this and that. So all of these places that you might see on a map that say devil typically were sacred places to the Native Americans. And the puritanical kind of fear got them to label it as such to keep people away, or maybe to demonize this, strange group of people that they were trying to colonize. So it was definitely, that was something, when I learned about that, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I went to this place called the Devil's Den in Connecticut, where there's like this underground cave, and you can just feel the vibes around here. Something weird went down, but that site is more of an experiential site. If you want to consider like something that you can see with your eyes, like there's all of these stone alignments. Like in Connecticut, there's one that's kind of close to the shore. It's called Gungiwamp, and it's these stone caverns, big, huge, massive stones with moss and dirt kind of covering them. And they're almost similar to what you'd have in Ireland with like I forget the proper name, but it's like two stones and a flat stone over it.
A dolmen.
Built into a hill. Yeah. And they have a couple of them, but they're situated in such a way that the back window of the little cavern, reflects the light on the solstice, right? So on the solstices, so these stones are huge, and they're also aligned just right so that, it's like a clock or a calendar. So this is just one example, and people in Connecticut, for the most part, have no idea that this place exists. It's not like Stonehenge where you can, take a tour, and, you'd have to really do some research before you go and take a tour. It's not, publicized, and it's not easy to get to, but, it exists, and that's a part of this larger mystery. There's so many unexplained little nooks and crannies of your own backyard.
You'd love it over here. We've got tons of megalithic stone circles and dolmens. I mean, the UK is riddled with them. Like I passed one the other week. I went on vacation the other week, and I passed one, and it was just in a farmer's field, but it had like a fence around it, and it was like that was a 3-stone dolmen. And but there's loads. Last time I went on a holiday, I went to the other side of the country, and I passed the UK's biggest freestanding megalith. I think it was about 30 feet tall, and there was a church next to it. So there was this megalith. It's like what I was saying about building on top. This site's been there for more than 5,000 years, I think. And there's it's in a church graveyard. And there is a Roman casket there as well. I forget what they call them. A Roman coffin. So you've got ancient prehistoric, or sort of Bronze Age, about maybe 2000 BC. You've got Roman stuff there from the year 0, and then you've got a church there from the 18th century. So it's like every 2,000 years, some got built in this site, or there's human activity around this site. And 2,000 years, that's like 2,160 years. It's a what do you call it? Not a processional number. 216. It's HD, isn't it? Super HD 216. You double that, you get 432, don't you? So I thought 432 megahertz, and it ties in with the ratio of the moon and the Earth and all that stuff. It's like everything's connected, and it's just funny that every 2,000 years something sort of religious gets put in this exact same spot.
Down to the exact measurement, and in alignment with the celestial calendar. And I when you brought up the Roman part, it kind of threw me off, because that's something that I'm particularly fascinated in right now, is how the Roman Empire sort of took what was Druidic culture and co-opted it, really erased it from history. Now we only have like King Arthur and Merlin's legends, but like for the most part, a lot of that stuff was lost. Am I wrong about that?
I mean, pretty much. I mean, the Romans got up to the north of England. They never finished the job. So there would have been some cultural transmission, right in the north of Scotland, you would imagine, during the Roman occupation. But I think, like you, we've got sort of a cultural memory as a species of something that happened before. And it's like Graham Hancock put it best when he says we're a species with amnesia, words to that effect. And
that's why I think this mystery, the history, it's all very fascinating, because we're starting to wake out of that illusion, right? I mean, and I mean, even down to like, okay, so in Connecticut, there's New London, and it's on the Thames River, right? Which is where London is, right? In the UK is on the Thames River. So, or you guys call it the River Thames, right?
Yep.
So I just thought, there's something magical about that, where they're naming things the same. They're sort of creating these like reflections, you know. There's New Britain, Connecticut, and then there's Britain, you know, but there's New London, and then the Thames River. And I just thought,
New York.
Right, York, exactly. And York, that's a Roman outpost in England, in ancient England, right? So
yeah, there's a statue of oh my god, I'm blanking on his name. The emperor,
Caesar,
Constantine.
Oh, okay.
Emperor. There's a big statue of Emperor Constantine in the centre of York because he was the first Christian Roman emperor.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure he was coronated as Caesar in York, and then he went back to Rome to take the title. Best in the world, Caesar.
And all of this is to say, like, you know, I'm not a specialist. I don't have any answers. I'm just pointing out, like, these weird similarities and coincidences, because there's so much more. And then you find a guy like Graham Hancock who has, you know, multiple books about it, and he specializes in this total subject. But then there's like even deeper specialists like Michael Wan, who specializes in, you know, the Susquehanna River, and then Ross Ben, who's like checking out Philadelphia and specializing in all the mystery there. So when we can create this larger picture of what's going on from all of the different intelligent people and all of the resources we can gather in this kind of networked way, it's going to be something to, you know, really counter against places like the Smithsonian Institute, you know, in America, who they basically try to, you know, corral history into these narratives, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. We had Adam Stokes on who wrote a book about giants in Ohio, and he told us all about the Smithsonian, and particularly when it comes to Native American history, you know, we're the Smithsonian, we have this narrative, and that's going to be the truth from now on. And you know, we're only just starting to piece things back together now. And it makes you wonder. I often ask myself, how historically accurate is history? The history that we're given, anyway. And this is the thing that because I love history and I love reading about history. And the one thing you learn is you've got to, you can't just read a text. You have to read the author as well. Who wrote it? When were they alive? What were the circumstances while they were alive? What was this author's political alignment? You know, you've got to. You've said this word twice, and it's the best word for it is discernment. It's trying to piece things together yourself, and it's really hard because I love wacky stuff, and you can end up going down a rabbit hole just because it's so tantalizing and intriguing, and you could be being led astray, and you've got to check. You've got to be so careful with what you're consuming. I mean, what's your attitude to research? Do you like super focus on subjects when you're researching in the esoteric realm, or is it more of a shotgun approach? Or do you even have a method? Have you even stopped to think about how you conduct your research?
I love this question, because I definitely over the past few weeks have thought about it. But it's like a form of like bibliomancy, you know. You kind of go into a bookstore and the right book comes to you, you know, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, you know, out of the hundreds of books I've bought, I've read every single one, but I'm a pretty fast reader, and I skim and scam, and I find, you know, scan, not scam. Sorry about that. Skim and scan. I hope people aren't thinking I'm skimming and scamming, but anyway. So I skim and scan these books, and it's so funny, like the way that the information jumps out, you know, and right now, you know, I'm like kind of creating this like library that's becoming sort of a burden, since I don't have a place to live right now, you know, so they're all just in my grandmother's basement waiting for me to find the right library. But yeah, I think my research is hands-on, you know, and like these stones right here, I could show you, I just got from the Susquehanna River, but we went and visited this place in the Susquehanna called Falmouth. You see these like
there's a Falmouth in Cornwall on the west coast of the UK. Yeah, same name again.
Okay. There we go. So yeah, in Falmouth, Pennsylvania, along the Susquehanna River, there's this spot where you can find all of these really strange rocks, really smooth rocks, and some of them are huge. I mean, most of them are huge, right? But the ones you can pick up are strange too. But the large ones have like bowls shaped into them, perfectly circular bowls, and water has collected in them and other stones have collected in them, and they're just like these shimmering little pools. And like for people who can only maybe see online, I definitely recommend looking it up, because they're really out of this world stones along the Susquehanna River. And just going there and experiencing the energy, thinking about what this could be, and then going to the experts, because the experts say like a glacier created this. But like this stone right here, I hold it in my hand and I see like all these shell imprints, and it makes you wonder, like, would a glacier have done this? How could a glacier have done this? I mean, theoretically, if it was cold enough to where a glacier was going on, is that alone enough force to imprint a shell into stone? Like, I don't know. Maybe. But these are the kind of things you can, like, kind of just go, and if you go to the right place and you really put it out there, it was only a year ago that I didn't know Michael Wan. I was just a fan of the Higher Side Chats, and I listened to his conversations with Greg Carlwood, and I was driving by the Susquehanna River just by chance. So I stopped and I said a prayer. I said my piece with the river. I prayed for the river, and just like put my heart into it. And then less than a year later, I'm having Michael Wan on my podcast, which leads to me going and visiting him in Pennsylvania. And to make things even more synchronistic, we planned this podcast a month or so ago, right? And I had no idea that I would be going on this trip. But Michael Wan lives in Lancaster, where Amish people live. And this is the Amish Inquisition, man. The first time ever this week in my life, I saw Amish people. I was like, so to bring the synchronicity into the real forefront is like, here I am talking to Amish Phil, and just a couple of days ago, I saw actual Amish people for the first time in my life, all by coincidence.
I can add another dimension to your synchronicity. Did you say Lancaster?
Lancaster.
Yeah, well, I'm in the county of Lancashire. Lancaster's 10 miles north of me.
Oh, wow. Okay. See? And yeah. Amish, I mean, come on now. I can ask where the inspiration for the name came from.
You saw an Amish person in Lancaster there, and I'm Amish Phil, and I'm in Lancashire. And that's just fucking weird. That is fucking weird. That's fucking weird. Now, I'm wondering now if you've manifested me or if I've manifested you.
I wonder. I think that's part of it.
What's going on? Is this you changing your reality or me changing your reality, Mark?
Both are simultaneously true. I think that's really how it works.
We're synchronized. Are we synchronized?
Like a swimmer, like a group of swimmers.
Oh my God. When do we get married?
We have to go through our swim routine first.
Okay.
Your legs to be flipping through the air.
I'm all right at breaststroke, but apart from that, I'm a bitch.
Well, we'll have to teach you the butterfly.
I've had plenty of compliments about my breaststroke.
All right. But I gotta ask you, where the Amish Inquisition, the Amish Phil, where does that come from, other than being?
Have you heard of Monty Python?
Yes.
Right. They're a really famous comic troupe from the UK. John Cleese, Michael Palin, Terry Jones, and Jonathan Chapman. Was it Mark Chapman? I think, or was it Mark Chapman who killed John Lennon? I can't remember. That's another synchronicity, probably.
I think it was Mark Chapman who killed John Lennon.
Yeah, he wasn't in Monty Python. Not that guy. But Monty Python had a scene called the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. And because we're English and we're big Monty Python fans, I just thought Amish Inquisition's a bit of a pun. And it's sort of kind of ironic because Amish people don't have technology. So an Amish podcast is a bit of an oxymoron. And the other thing is, I'll tell you what it was. When we started, I think it was 2017, summer of 2017 we started. There must have been a big hoo-ha or controversy in the media about people being offended. And we started this podcast, and I'm a big free speech advocate. I think you should be able to say what you want, as long as you're not, threatening to kill someone or something. And everything in the media was people about being offended and oversensitive or whatever. And someone said, "What about the Amish? We can talk about the Amish. We can't offend them; they'll never hear it." So there's like about 3 different reasons. I mean, I know it's a shit name for a podcast, but that's the best we've got.
My girlfriend and I, we were laughing about it. We're like, "Oh, isn't that funny? You're going to be on the Amish Inquisition." And we were just talking, basically with people who live in and around Amish country. We went there ourselves. I mean, yeah, it's wild. You see them, riding horses down the street with the cart and buggy behind them, and they all kind of dress the same. So it's really, it's like a peek into, 400 years ago, what things might have been like. And
there's something I'll tell you what, there is something definitely attractive to me about leaving technology behind in that manner. I do wonder, if a lot of these things are a net benefit or not.
What I have found out, though, through my week being sort of in proximity to the Amish, is that they have a lot of loopholes, sort of like the Jews, kind of with the whole Sabbath, when they have certain technology they can't use, but they create this technology to you make a loophole so they're not offending God. So the Amish have those kind of loopholes too, where they're not allowed to smoke white cigarettes, but they can go and get a red colored cigarette or a black, or a brown paper cigarette, but white paper cigarettes are not allowed, So it's just it's kind of a interesting
racist
thing.
really.
The other, maybe, but what I found interesting is the powwow. That's the word for, or bruja is the word for this type of Amish magic that they do.
What? Amish magic?
It's like a mix of German and Native American magic. And I found this so fascinating, these people outside of, on the fringe of society in a way, outside of technology, and there's this stream of mysticism. And you see it on their barns. They have these beautiful paintings that are like hexagram symbols, and it's like a sigil magic, and I'm sure they have little spells, and there's some folklore. We went to this one site that was just beautiful, this huge rock and a tree, the roots growing over the rock, almost framing it like a picture frame. It's a massive rock. I'm almost 6'9". I'm 6'8",
Wow.
So, and it was taller than me, this is a massive rock,
How big's your car? You don't look that tall in the car. 6'8".
Not big enough. I'll tell you that. It's a spacious Nissan Sentra, Phil.
Fuck, okay. I had no idea you were that massive.
Well, also for your, UK audience, I'm, maybe it's a little head trip to see me on this side of the car, but yeah, it's a spacious Sentra. It's nice. It has enough leg room, I think. But
did you have a big? I'm really curious. Sorry, but I'm so curious about you. You've heard all that. I'm sure you've heard all this before, and you're sick of it and stuff. But did you were you the biggest kid all the way through school? Or were you like a sort of a middle-sized kid and then had a massive growth spurt at like 13? How did it work?
Well, I think I was average height in elementary school.
Right.
And then in middle school, about like, 6th to 8th grade, 11 to 13 years old was when I was like the tallest kid, but I was never the tallest kid. I was just in a group of tallest kids because there was like, this basketball player who went on to be, college basketball player around my height. And then there was a kid younger than me who was always taller than me. So even though I'm a giant, I was, not the only giant in my school for some reason. But yeah, it's, it's all right. The average door frame is 7 feet. So I'm just like an inch away from hitting my head when I walk through a door. So like,
no way. Ours are 6'6" standard door frame.
Yeah, the door. Well, you guys are using the metric system. That's why.
Well, right? Don't get me started on imperial and metric. Do you know what was who was it? The ancient Greek guy. I can't remember which one it was who said man is the measure of all things. And these imperial measurements we had, they're all related to the human body. So like an inch is the width of your thumb. That's an inch. A foot is a foot, or distance between the elbow and the wrist. And it all goes back to even the ancient Egyptians had worked this out. The cubit. A cubit, I think, is the distance between the elbow and the first finger. And then maybe a royal cubit is the elbow and the second finger. I can't remember. I've probably fucked that up. But it's right. All these the imperial measurements are all encoded in our DNA, in our classification, our species, our meat vehicle, whatever you want to call it. And there's a reason that there's value in that to me. And we're in this country, we want to throw it away and use metric. It's like no, you're throwing away a clue. Part of the evidence, important information. We need to know there's a reason why the Egyptians thought it was important to use this measurement. We shouldn't throw that away for the sake of it adding up to 100. There's value in that.
I guess in America we don't really consider it. It must be a sore subject for you.
Yeah,
I feel like I might not shouldn't have brought that up to be polite.
Yeah, because the Old English and the Celtic, they all use this system, this imperial system, but the metric system has sort of been imposed on us by the EU, the European Union stuff, and I think it's a huge mistake. I think it's huge. I think we should be using imperial measurements because there are reasons those units exist, and we don't want to forget that information. Yeah,
no, I mean it's definitely,
it's like a mile. A mile is 1,000 paces. That's 2 steps. So a mile, 1,000 Latin mil. A mile is related to the human body. Sorry for butting it.
No, it's okay. I was thinking about the Temple of Solomon and how they modeled it after the measurements of a man, just like you're describing.
Yeah,
it even kind of reminds me of the story of Osiris too, where they build the cage like that the coffin that he gets nailed into. It's like the exact proportions of him, and that's just a metaphor for him coming into the material world. So the measurement of this kind of structure of our anatomy is important. I don't know. Sam Tripoli, he calls me the Nephilim. He calls me Nephilim when I see him in person. So if that's any measurement of how tall I am, but it's like it's interesting because I think there's definitely like some truth to that, like. Because I think my heritage is kind of in the Scottish, and there's a lot of really tall Scottish people too, right? And what
Jimmy Cranky,
and really cranky too.
Jimmy Cranky is a famous tall Scottish man.
Ah, okay.
Google it, you'll laugh.
Well, but that's my thought. Is like, well, what if there was this culture of people that were more in, trading and cohabitating with taller versions of humans, and that's why there's like weird tall people like me still around with like Norse heritage, or Northern Irish, or Scottish, and all of the different things that make me up. Not that I've ever done the ancestry.com. I did it the hard way.
I had
to ask my grandpa.
Another good source for these linkages between the human form and architecture is the Gothic cathedrals in Europe. So there's a guy, a French scholar, I think he was French, called René Schwaller de Lubitsch, and he was knocking about in the 19th century, I think, if I remember right. And he's written loads of books, but particularly one called The Temple in Man, about the temple at Luxor, and all the different relationships between human anatomy and the dimensions and ratios and angles built into the fabric of the temple at Luxor. And I think he spent 20 years there. He was there 20 years basically just measuring this thing, to the best of engineering capability at the time, like the most precise survey possible. And he devoted his entire life to it. And then his daughter, I think, took up the gauntlet and carried on his research. I forget her name now. I don't know if she's written any books, but that's a good one, Schwaller de Lubitsch. I think you'll know Randall Carlson from Grimerica.
Yeah.
And I think he's been on Rogan a number of times as well.
Actually, just booked him on Tinfoil Hat like a month ago. He was on Tinfoil Hat.
Well, that's how I found Grimerica, was because I was searching for Randall Carlson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually kind of similar for me. I got into Joe Rogan like everybody did in that time, like 4 or 5 years ago. And yeah, the Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson stuff led me to podcasting somehow. I don't know if it was Grimerica first, because there was also this Stuff They Don't Want You to Know podcast that was kind of like an early conspiracy show. And those conspiracy guys over there in Ireland has been around for quite a while. But I'm sorry to cut you off there, Phil. Let's hear.
I can't even remember what I was talking about. I was just listening to you.
America show. How you found that through Rogan and Carlson?
That's it. Yeah. And we had Darren and Graham on last year. I think maybe a year ago, something like that. And yeah, I think it's. Do you play an instrument? Have you ever been in a band, Mark?
No, everybody thinks I look like I should, that kind of thing.
So when you play instrument in a band, or you start learning guitar, for example, you start by emulating people who you like, and they become your influences. And as you get more competent as a guitar player, you start to learn to express yourself as well. So a bit of you gets mixed in with these maybe 3 or 4 other guitar players who are your influences. And forever, as long as you'll play, pretty much, you'll always have sort of remnants of little stylistic twists that sounded like Jimmy Page. Or, that sounded like Hendrix. Fucking hell, I just sounded like Hendrix for a microsecond. So something that you did, some idiosyncronicity in your play, managed to perfectly mimic something Hendrix would have done, day in, day out. But I think that podcasting is the same, in that you start by listening, and then you start to emulate the people who you look up to. So like our show, our first hour is like Grimerica, where we interview people, talk to people, authors, a lot of the same subjects as you, like esoterica, alternative history, the nature of reality, philosophy, all that kind of stuff. And so the first half is like that with Grimerica, but the second half is more sort of like OBDM or No Agenda. It's like looking at the news, trying to analyze it, see what the message is, learn the discernment that you talked about. And it's like, you sort of suck up these influences. I don't know where I'm going with this. And then you sort of put your own sort of spin on it, like being in a band.
Yeah, no, I like that analogy. I've used it to kind of coax some of my friends into podcasting with me, because a lot of my friends don't listen to podcasts, unfortunately, like my friends in real life. But that's the beauty of it, like you were saying before, is I've made a lot of really great friends just who are already doing this stuff through podcasting, and then we kind of meet in the middle and form a band, and that's why I made this cooperative, is because we're all able to do our own thing independently, and with a guy like me kind of telling you, oh, hey, you should be on Good Pods and avoid Anchor, and all of these other little tips that they don't tell you with the podcasting 101 videos you can find, or tutorials, or fireside chats. God forbid you ever host with them. I mean, they're going to steal all your content, So those are the things that I'm researching with the cooperative. And yeah, man, totally. I feel like Grimerica's show, the Higher Side Chats, Tinfoil Hat are a big influence on a lot of people, and I try not to replicate their shows, but you're right, you can't help but emulate. Yep. And that's where you have to find the balance of being yourself while also emulating and being inspired by those who are doing it better than you. And then one day, maybe you do it better, and then they look at you and that inspires them, because we're all equals at this, we're all, and that's kind of like, for me, my story really kicked off into podcasting when I gave Sam Tripoli a copy of the Kabbalion, the 7 Hermetic Laws.
Wow.
And I was just a random fan of his, meeting him after a comedy show. And I said, hey, bro, take this book. I had it in this Faraday fabric bag that I made, so if he wanted to go off the grid, he could. And that was enough for him to be like, okay, cool, man. And he remembered me, and then he had me on his Patreon show, had me back. He's like, this guy's pretty interesting, let me have him on this show. So, and then one thing led to another, and I'm working for him. So
yeah, did you do one with Sam about Aleister Crowley?
Yeah, that was, it's interesting because they just did an episode which was pretty cool, the Great Magic Occult Debate, right? That's the newest episode of Tinfoil Hat. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a subject that people were really fascinated in, and I knew that back, it was almost a year ago now, when I did that show. I was like, people are going to be interested in Crowley, but I wanted to take a different perspective on it, because I know a lot of people, there's people who go into the Crowley history, but they don't look into his darker stuff. And then there's some people who only look at the dark stuff he's done, and they're like, he's a criminal, fuck this, you know what I mean? There's two extremes. There's people who are like, oh yeah, he's like my British yogi, and then there's other people who are like, no, he was a child molester spy, So I found this guy is such a controversial character. Let me add what I know to the mix, because I've studied him, a little bit, and he's a controversial guy. I have a bunch of his books because kind of naively trying to learn about magic, I was like, all right, let me look at this guy, So I bought a couple of his books. One of them is one of the most expensive books, I'd say, that I've ever bought. And this was way before I even listened to podcasts that I bought this book. But, it was really interesting, the feeling that this book, the Book of Magic by Crowley, it's literally his Liber 4, right? The one that talks about the theory and practice of magic. And when I got this book and I brought it into my sphere, it started affecting things in a weird way, it had a sort of energy to it. And I've since kind of canceled that energy out, I think, by talking about it and bringing it to the light, And there are things in that book that are a little strange, and you can take them one way or another. And it does talk about child sacrifice, straight up in the book, no, he makes no bones about it. And I think, context is important. When you're doing research, you need to understand the cultural context. You need to understand the historical context to understand what someone's really saying, because there were ways that people wrote that might have seemed one way, and from our modern perspective, from their perspective, they're saying something completely different, So all of that combined, I created this kind of like perspective, like on his life, you know, my perspective going from the beginning to the end of his life, and like finding the weird synchronicities and making some connections. And that episode did really well, I think, you know, because a lot of people hit me up saying either I loved it or I hate you because you talked about Crowley, or I hate you because you're a part of it, or I hate you because you didn't say the right things about Crowley. So there was a lot of negative attention that I got from that, but it was great because I'm like, wow, 100,000 people just saw something I talked about, you know. And I've been having conversations like this my whole life. Just most of the people who were participating didn't want to be there. You know what I mean? Like, start smoking a joint with someone and bring up like esoteric stuff. They're like, what are you talking about? That's not real, dude. You know, like aliens, okay, maybe, but the pyramids, what are you saying, you know? But now with podcasting, I've found people who actually like give a shit about this research and like, you know, wanna learn more and have so many things to add too, because I'm only one person. I can't figure it all out. But that's my approach with Crowley, was like, let me highlight the darker side of this guy to kind of show people both sides of the coin, because there's people out there who just talk about the nice things he did. There's people out there who only talk about the
polarized.
And I think he's bad. You know, my opinion, you want to really ask me my opinion, he was a bad dude. He did bad things. He did things that I would never do, you know. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to run away and hide and put my hands over my eyes and not see the truth of who he was, you know. And when I had a conversation with Sam, you know, it didn't go the way I thought it would, but that was like on me. You know, I could have did a better job of explaining it. And that's fine. I think that added to it, because I was one of the only people who've ever kind of like argued with Sam on his show in that way and got him all fired up about a topic. To this day, if anyone makes a mention of Crowley on his show, Sam goes, I would fight that dude. I inspired him to say that, you know, in a minor way. So that's kind of like the solace I take from it. And I'm not done researching him. I've put it on pause right now, but I don't plan on like selling any of the books that I have about him. I think there's still more for me to learn about him, and like, you know, it's just a matter of like perspective, you know. I have almost the same birthday as him. He was born October 10th. I was born October 11th, you know, so there's a coincidence I couldn't ignore when I first looked him up and got interested in this stuff. And I don't think it's done me wrong, because like here I am now. Sam, you know, took me on, and I work for him. I also have the room to create my own podcast, and I do the cooperative thing, and maybe Crowley's sort of energy added to that in a weird way. Who knows?
I think you're definitely right about the way podcasters sort of democratized information. And that most, you know, until the invention of podcasting, people had the TV, which was pre-programmed, and the radio, which was, you know, all right, there's outliers, but, you know, most people listen to the main BBC radio channels or whatever. And podcasting has opened up this avenue for people to explore different ideas and worldviews and find out information that wouldn't otherwise be fed to them. And it's definitely a universal good in that respect, I would say.
Here's a point that I think is emerged from podcasting that I wonder if you think is, because I don't know how to feel about it. I might be a little paranoid, but hear me out, okay? So now these transcript technologies where they can take a podcast and transcribe it, right? I mean, think about what's happening. I mean, from one side, now publishing a book is easier than ever. You can just talk into your microphone and, you know, create a book, transcribe it into words, edit it, publish it. You could put it out, you know, without even printing it on paper. There's so many ebook readers these days. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the other side of it is you can know what, like, you know, figure out syntax in this reverse engineered way to where, like, what if there's an Amish Phil bot out there one day that's just like chopped up clips from your podcast, like organized in such a way that it seems like an AI consciousness, you know? And like me too, like I've, you know, put 63 episodes out. That's almost 100 and something hours.
Yep, that's enough.
You know, it's enough. That's enough voice of Mark to like create a Mark bot, you know, with this kind of transcript technology. So that's the side of it, as like a podcaster who's also conspiracy theorist, participating in something that is going to be a conspiracy one day. But at the same time, it's like, hey man, this is how I woke up. And if I can wake other people up through this vessel, like, it wasn't the total package, and I wasn't totally like a fish out of water before I found podcasts, but it like I said, it fueled the fire even more than cannabis could, even more than books could, because it brought it to real life. You know, oh, here's a guy who's all the way across the Atlantic Ocean who shares a lot of the same ideas as me, and we don't have the same opinions, but we can share, you know, our opinions and meet in the middle and have these great discussions.
There was an AI bot that came online on a website about a year, maybe 2 years ago, and it was a Jordan Peterson emulator. And basically you could type in any sentence you wanted and it would spit out Jordan Peterson saying your sentence. In fact, like some of our episodes at the start have Jordan Peterson saying, don't forget to like and 5-star review the Amish Inquisition, or something stupid like that. Because it was up for about a week, and then they took it down. Jordan Peterson like had it out with the guy who ran the website, and by mutual agreement they took it down because they realized how dangerous this is. You can get Jordan Peterson on a video, an audio clip saying anything you want. How does he prove that he didn't say it? Right. Well, he can't, and this is sort of the danger. But
it brings to question every voice audio clip you've ever heard. How do we know that they haven't had this technology since World War II? You know, like, or even, you know, earlier. Like, there's, you know, telegraphs. You know,
this is where you need ethics to come in. You would hope that someone in control had some ethics and would decide that this isn't acceptable, so we're not going to do this.
Yeah. But isn't it funny that the guy Aristotle who wrote ethics is like anything but ethical? Molesting children and shit. Like, he's another person like Crowley. Not to make light of that, but you know, it's like, this is the type of people who've created our society. You know, it's just. Yeah, it's stunning, you know, to really, the truth is dark, but at the same time, when we shine light on it, it demagnetizes the polarity, the evil. You know, that's something that Ross Ben kind of taught me through speaking with him this past week in Wissahickon Creek in Philadelphia. And anybody listening to this, if you happen to live near Philadelphia, I encourage you to get in touch with Ross's work somehow, whether it's his book or his videos online, and like look into it, because it's just like, it's so wild, like what you can see if you just take a walk around the city, you know, and just see, you know, where things are placed, and back to like the mounds and stuff, and rivers too. You know, the Schuylkill River goes through Philadelphia. The Dutch people named it. I mean, there's just so much interesting history there.
Cool. Well, Mark, it's just clicked over midnight here. I'm gonna have to go to bed.
You're kind of yawning on me, Phil. I didn't think it was because I was boring. I thought maybe you're tired, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just boring. No, fine too. I appreciate it.
No, it's been great to meet you. Finally, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise.
And yeah, it's been good. I'm a bit blasted, to be honest.
You did kind of make a spur decision to smoke weed with me. I'm sorry to do that to you.
No, I didn't. It's illegal in this country.
Well, I'm in New England. It's legal here, but you're in Old England, and I'm sorry to hear you guys aren't.
Amish Phil from Lancaster.
Hey, let me tell you guys though, if you're in England right now, real quick PSA, illegal weed is still better than legal weed. Okay, get it from your local dealer. Don't go to the corporate dispensaries.
No, you can grow it yourself.
Exactly, or grow your own, even better.
Yeah. Not that I ever would like, but you know, I don't touch the stuff personally, but yeah.
This has been a wild Swapcast, right?
Yeah.
Hope to put this out on both of our podcasts, but thank you for having me, man. I appreciate this.
No problem. And it'll go out tomorrow. Don't forget to check all the links in the description. We'll you know, all the social media links will be there. You're on Instagram.
Yeah.
I watched your live video today.
Yep. Oh, so, yeah, you saw me?
Yeah.
Even?
Yeah. You can follow Mark everywhere. And it's been really fun. I better go before I collapse.
Get some sleep, buddy. I appreciate you. We'll do this again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care of yourself, Mark. Happy travels.
Right on. Nice meeting you, bro.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Hello.
One more week, and he'll be back.
Will he, though?
The Bigfoot.
Will he be back?
Why?
I've got a message. Lee from the Big Conspire is concerned for Amish Ben's welfare.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know what he contributed, to be honest with you. So it's a dour sense of humour.
And smells.
Yeah.
Which don't really translate.
A giant beard.
Yeah, Lee's wondering if he was maybe abducted by aliens.
No, he may have been abducted. He has been taken away in a caravan somewhere, hasn't he?
Or maybe crop circles.
Yeah. I think has he said that it's taken him 8.5 hours to get home today, and that's why you shouldn't tow a caravan to the other end of the country.
Yeah, it's stupid, isn't it? I mean, you can just hire one. Why the fuck would you do that to yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Did we? How many holidays does he need to go on to pay back his to earn his caravan? I think it was 20, maybe 30. I don't know.
I don't know because I don't know what it all costs to store, and it's not like a free holiday. You got to pay the site fees. So you're only getting a discount on each holiday.
Right. Okay.
He's probably getting shafted, big time.
Is this before or after he was abducted?
He's being probed by some Haven rep.
Yeah, Haven.
Mm-hmm. We mustn't forget to do the housekeeping this week.
Yeah, we didn't do it last week, did we?
No, we fucked up.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. Have we got double housekeeping then? Double.
No. No, it's pretty much formulaic.
Okay.
Do you want to get it out of the way?
Are we going to do it now? Just straight in there, dry?
Yeah.
The housekeeping.
We're not sure what's going to happen tonight. We might have a guest later on.
Yeah.
So we might as well do the housekeeping and the news. I've got lots of fun stuff to do tonight.
Oh, you said this 3 times now, so this
twice.
It's not going to be fun. Go on.
What?
Go on.
Do you want to do some housekeeping?
Yeah, go on.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
This is a value for value podcast. If you find this podcast valuable, please consider returning some value. There's a myriad of ways of doing this.
There are a myriad.
What's your favourite way?
Artwork. I don't think we receive enough artwork.
No.
I think we need more artwork for title cards.
Yeah, show artwork, episode artwork.
Yeah.
That would be greatly appreciated. Either email it to us at thearmisinquisition@gmail.com. You can send it to us via the Discord if you're on there.
Yeah.
Or via whatever social media. It's all the links are in the show notes.
Whichever medium you prefer.
Yeah, whatever's most convenient.
Yeah. What else? I always like reviews.
Oh gosh,
It's nice. Yeah, we've not had an iTunes review for donks.
To be fair, hardly anyone listens on iTunes.
Right, okay.
It's a small percentage.
We've hardly had any Garner reviews.
But the iTunes are the ones that seem to matter.
Right, okay.
So if you are on iTunes and you have 5 minutes, drop us a review.
Not even 5 minutes. It doesn't take 5 minutes to write a review.
I don't know. I haven't got an iPhone. I presume it's pretty easy.
Yeah, so I mean, it only takes like a second to press 5 stars and move on.
That's a rating.
Oh,
we want reviews.
Right, okay. Maybe that's where we're going wrong then.
Asking for reviews.
Yeah.
Well, rate us as well.
Yeah, rate your mate.
Rate and review.
Yeah.
Follow us on Odyssey.
Yeah. Chuck us some crypto if you feel like it on Odyssey.
You can earn free Odyssey every day. Free Odyssey. You can earn free crypto every day on Odyssey.
Yeah.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you know, you only get sort of half the podcast on here. Mm-hmm. The second halves, which are usually too spicy for YouTube, have to go on Odyssey or on the podcast download. So you're missing out if you're not on Odyssey. If you want to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff so far to be removed from YouTube is probably one joke about Prince Philip. So, you know.
We're on borrowed time.
Yeah.
I think if they decided to go through the back catalogue. Yeah, I mean, you know, but we've got to sort of, we're trying to play by the rules.
Yeah.
Just so that we can point people to go to Odyssey and the MP3 download, Spotify, iTunes and all that lot. So yeah, if you are watching on YouTube, check that out.
Buy some merch. Look what I'm wearing.
Holy shit, I didn't even notice.
Didn't even notice your own merch.
You're literally a communist.
This way. There we go.
Yeah, there he is. Old Lenin.
And this is a lovely, lovely hoodie. It's so soft still. It's been washed like twice.
Yeah.
In a year.
And no fade and no detriment to the...
Yeah, to the transfer.
Excellent.
Comfy.
You can get the new logo, courtesy of Amy the artist, on there as well. She made it fit for putting on a T-shirt because after she'd finished laughing at my attempts of Microsoft Paint, she made it so it would work on a T-shirt. So you can get that, or a hoodie, or a mug, or whatever.
Yeah.
The Amish loot chest.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
Follow us on social media.
Follow us.
Join the Discord.
Join the Discord.
Become a producer.
Become a producer.
This is crowd-funded, or crowd-produced, rather. If you find something weird, particularly in the news media, that's what I like.
Yeah.
That we can deconstruct. Send us a link or a video clip.
Now, you say deconstruct. You just mainly laugh at.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Depends what it is. Some of it requires deconstruction.
Okay.
You got to realise what they're doing, what the motivation is for running certain stories, how they phrase certain things. You can't, if you just sort of sit back and consume it, you're just being brainwashed, essentially. So that is an important service.
It is, isn't it, that we provide? I say we, you.
Well, you, the producers as well.
And you.
Because we've only so many ears and eyes and time to scour social media and the news for these things. So and we get a lot of stuff through Discord. Sometimes too much. We've got to pick the cream, scoop the cream off the top. And to fit in this time that we have allotted every week.
Yeah.
What else? Memes? Memes for Instagram?
Yeah, send us memes.
Yeah, we've not had any memes for ages, actually. That's weird.
Slacking.
Yeah, anything else? Email us at thearmisinquisition@gmail.com. There are various threads on the Discord for feedback, guest suggestions, topics, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That it?
Could always toss us a fucking coin.
Toss a coin to your witcher.
Yeah, do it for the lads.
The
lads. Because,
we're northern and we're bloody miserable and the weather's fucking shit.
Exactly.
You are extremely cool, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, on the note, shall we thank the producers for episode 194? There is quite a few.
If we must.
Yeah. Okay, we have Lee from The Big Conspire, Helen from Discord, Tired Man, Gav Scott, Robbie Robertson, Matt Chin from Apocalypse YouTube channel, and Nomi Nosnodge. You are so amazing.
They are.
Yeah.
So amazing in their love.
It's a miracle.
Literally. The best mate.
Let's big up the Mandems.
It's time to big up the Mandems. Yo.
The dwarf, the carrot, the grape, the cunt, the
Communist.
The
homophobe.
The
misogynist.
the cripple, and the mother of
Ronnie Pickering!
From hell.
Yeah. Thanks for your support. We're just trying to,
Building back better.
and we need your help to do it.
Yeah.
So keep it up. Mm-hmm. Right, let's move on. Let's do some COVID news. Like I said, COVID, like Michael Gove. COVID news.
COVID-19 news.
People have got to understand vaccination is going to be, in the end, your route to liberty.
The magic vaccine.
A big fat shot in the ass.
From hell.
Oh! It's just, super painful.
Like a judgment day and terminating mode, like.
It's not going to allow us to go completely back to normal.
Anal swab test in the same ballpark as seasonal influenza.
Because we're getting bored, we want to have fun.
I can't save you if you're not wearing a face mask.
Read the standing orders. Read them and understand them.
Epic dub.
Right, let's go back in time. I've got some old COVID news to start with. COVID news. This is from Pfizer.com.
Right.
And this is the 18th of November, 2020.
Last year.
It's like 10 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Pfizer and BioNTech conclude phase 3 study of COVID-19 vaccine candidate meeting all primary efficacy endpoints. Primary efficacy analysis demonstrates BNT162b2, the Pfizer jab, to be 95% effective against COVID-19 beginning 28 days after the first dose. 170 confirmed cases of COVID-19 were evaluated, with 162 observed in the placebo group versus 8 in the vaccine group. Pfizer Magic Juice stops you getting COVID. Let's go to this week.
Good afternoon. We start with breaking news this hour. Scientists stress that more research is required, but early findings from Public Health England suggest that vaccines might not be effective in reducing the transmissibility of the Delta variant of coronavirus. Well, let's cross straight away to our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, who can give us more information on this. Ashish, just how worried do we need to be?
What? So what's happening?
We've had it from the CDC as well. Rochelle Walensky with a statement
saying
this week
that the vaccine doesn't work against the Delta variant.
Doesn't stop you getting it or transmitting it.
Okay.
Let's hear more.
Good afternoon. We start with breaking news this hour. Scientists stress that more research is required, but early findings from Public Health England suggest that vaccines might not be effective in reducing the transmissibility of the Delta variant of coronavirus. Well, let's cross straight away to our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, who can give us more information on this. Ashish, just how worried do we need to be?
Not at all.
At the moment, just a little concerned, I think. I've spoken to the people at Public Health England this morning, and they are keen to stress these are very early findings. These are the initial findings, and a lot more research needs to be carried out to see exactly what this means for the long-term implications for the vaccine and for the Delta variant. This is the weekly technical briefing. This is what the PHE scientists have found out, and they make it public. And during the course of their research, they found that, and I'll read to you from the Public Health England guidance.
So this is a quotation from the technical report that comes out every week.
They said that they found from their initial research that levels of the virus in those who become infected with Delta, having already been vaccinated, might be similar to levels found in unvaccinated people. Essentially what that means is that's the viral load, the levels of the virus contained within a person. Now, if they're the same if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, that might impact the transmissibility of that virus, i.e. the ability to pass on that virus to another person. If you've been vaccinated, we have been told all along, and...
Who's told you all along? Well, the pharmaceutical companies, with the studies that they designed with their own endpoints.
The research has found that the vaccines reduce transmissibility. Now, these initial findings are seeming to suggest that they might not be as effective as once believed.
So,
well, I thought that you could get a virus even if you had been vaccinated, but it wasn't as bad. That was my understanding of a vaccine. So you can still get it.
Yeah, you get it and you kill it, and it never takes hold.
Right.
You have something called sterilizing immunity.
So they're saying that the vaccine doesn't provide that.
No, your viral load, according to this information, is the same as someone who's unvaccinated.
Oh, right, well, that's a waste of money then, isn't it?
Well, it has huge implications, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, for one, herd immunity is impossible.
From a vaccine?
From a vaccine, importantly. Good distinction, because natural immunity is sterilising immunity as far as we know. As far as people getting infected twice, it seems to be incredibly rare.
Well, sorry, I was going to say, I know somebody that says that they've had it twice.
My missus knows someone who's had it twice, but
it's whether it's from a PCR test.
They've had 2 positive tests.
Yeah. So it's whether it's accurate.
And if you don't have symptoms, it's kind of irrelevant. It's just symptoms that make you spread the virus more, isn't it? By coughing and sneezing.
Well, you would have thought that he would have had some symptoms to have a test twice.
Well, I don't know, because we routinely test 1 million people a day, or have been until recently.
No, I think this person went for a test off their own back twice and said they had it twice. But like you said, how accurate it is, isn't it?
Or is it another coronavirus?
That's what I mean, yeah.
No, it's one of them. Yeah. I mean, the point is that as far as, natural immunity has to be sterilising, otherwise we wouldn't exist as a species. We'd have been wiped out millions of years ago. Mm-hmm. So, the other implication is a vaccine passport.
It's pointless.
Completely pointless.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? That's interesting.
Unless you're just trying to control people, then I guess it's kind of useful.
Yeah.
But, there's some people have been saying, if this thing reduces your symptoms but doesn't reduce your infectivity, it could be worse because you won't even know you're ill. Part of our system, what do you call it, Darwin? Evolution. We know if we see someone coughing and spluttering, we know to keep away from them.
Yeah.
And if you're symptomatic, you feel ill, you're less likely. I know some people still go to the office, but you're less likely to. You're going to ring in sick. Whereas if this sort of clouds your symptoms or shrouds them and doesn't reduce your infectivity, it's just going to be like you're going to turn into a super spreading vaccine factory, a virus factory.
You are, aren't you? Yeah.
It's weird, and it's not isolated. It's not just PHE. As I said, the CDC released similar information last week.
It's like you said, it comes back, doesn't it, to the studies based on trusting pharmaceutical companies to
design their own studies.
Yeah.
Decide what their exclusions are going to be and when and how they exclude different people from the studies. Design the endpoints. And who's watching them? And are those people captured? Are they...
Like Amish Ben?
Yeah. Are they like former pharmaceutical industry workers? Are they looking forward to...
Normally are, aren't they?
Yeah, looking forward to a nice, cussy non-exec consulting job.
Yeah.
From, you know, somewhere down the line. Who knows? It's just that, yeah, I don't know. Should be careful what I say. Yeah. Yeah, just a complete sort of...
What the farage?
Moment.
What
really.
the farage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some bad news.
Oh, what is it?